are listening to the Moody Girl podcast with me, Emily Fazer. Throughout this series, we're going to be opening the minds of experts and delving into the world of alternative healing methods. Cool. So hi, Chloe. Thank you so much for being with me today.
Thanks for having me.
No problem. I first kind of found out about you through your first book, I'll tell you in person. And then we kind of organically just started chatting over Instagram. That first book for me was like, I just identified with it on such a deep level because I found personally, like I'm now 32, 33 later this year, and I'm kind of starting to begin to come out of that kind of craziness that was my 20s.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? So it was like so full on, and everything that you've described in your book, in that first initial, essays, I was just like, oh my God, I relate to so much of this. And I know that you told me yourself that like, that was before you even knew you had PMDD.
Yeah.
So I was just like, oh my God, light bulb moment. Like, this is how I spent the initial part of like, the latter of my teens, and then like fighting for answers in the early 20s. I mean, for anyone who's listening who hasn't heard of PMDD, I'll just give you a quick kind of synopsis of it. So it's called Premenstrual Dysphoric Disorder. It affects 1 in 20 to women and AFAB individuals. And I mean, leading up to your period, usually kind of like after ovulation, you can get, for me, it was like severe mood swings, depression, anxiety. I found that I was stuttering on my words, lack of interest, lack of energy in anything. What were your kind of symptoms, and how did you end up finding that diagnosis?
Yeah, well, it's interesting because for me, it actually began in my early 30s.
Wow. Okay.
But what you're saying is so fascinating because I had a conversation with Brett Buchert, who works for the International Association of Premenstrual Disorders, and she has read all my books. And just to be clear, I actually did have another book before I'll tell you in person. It was called Legs Get Led Astray. That was my first book. It was on a very small press. So that was essays. And then I'll tell you, and then my book Women, and then I'll tell you in person. But Brett has read every single book. And she was kind of saying to me, she was like, are you sure you didn't have PMDD in your 20s? And I think she's onto something. And I think you're onto something. I know I always struggled with my period, and I definitely have.
What age did you start your period? If you don't mind
11.
Wow. Okay.
What about you?
I mean, I didn't start until like 15.
Okay.
And I remember like all my friends had started, and like, yeah, I was just really late to it. And I remember like that, I'm not even that, like, I wasn't a sporty person in school, but I ended up doing hurdles like at school, like I don't know, maybe half an hour from my high school, which is so out of character for me. And I was wearing white shorts.
Oh my God, no.
So I was doing hurdles, which is something that's so out of character. And then I started my period in these white shorts.
That's and it was worst.
And I remember like I was on the bus back, and one of my friends was like, oh, I feel like I'm going to get a nosebleed. Like I'm going to get a nosebleed. I can like feel it. I can smell blood. And I was like, yeah, at that point, I didn't even think about it because I'd never had a period. I didn't even know what that felt like. And then I went to my friend's house and looked, and I was like, oh, okay, wow, I've started my period.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's a good, actually, first period story. So my new book, I have to send you a copy. It's called The Red Zone.
I've been reading about it.
There's a chapter that goes through everyone starting in the 1950s, like my family, all the way to 2019. So to show how all like people of different genders and different ethnicities, different locations, how they all experience your first period. Oh God, I wish I had you in there, because that's such an interesting story, especially the person saying like they could smell blood.
I know.
I was 11, and I always struggled with cramps. I would say I had more physical symptoms at first, which were just really the cramps, and I had like pretty heavy periods, I think. It's always hard to remember what your periods were like so much as a teenager, and I think that's because we're told, like, our culture is like kind of obsessed with being like, oh, just deal with it, and just like get over it. And we're not taught about like the nuances of how to support
Mm-hmm.
any kind of PMS. Like, and that's a lot in my book in these chapters. Like I was like 30 people interviewed, and each person about their first period, pretty much every person says no one ever talked to me about PMS, which is
Wow.
so crazy and sad, actually.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's usually just the parent saying, hey, here's a pad, here's a tampon, go ahead. Like, that's it. And that's not helpful when you're 11 years old, 12 years old, 15 years old, and you need a little bit of direction. So I think the world is changing in terms of that, which is great. But
Yeah.
I definitely, as a teenager, was moody. Who's to really say? Like, I what I know is that what I experienced with PMDD in my 30s was a feeling I had never felt in my life.
And so how did that, like, so you kind of went from so the pain side of things was like, the main sort of problem when you came on, going into your 30s, then how did that kind of materialize? Was it just like one cycle, you're like, holy shit, this is intense? Or
Yeah, it might have also been my late 20s. I feel like I just wasn't tracking it. So I think in my late 20s, it's just, hindsight is so interesting, because I do look at and I've written so much about my life that it is kind of easy to look back on things and be like, was that PMDD actually? But I wasn't tracking my period, and like period tracking apps didn't even really exist when I was in my, mid 20s. So I do now wonder if some of those kind of episodes, I'm thinking about one relationship in particular that was very tumultuous that I wrote about in my book, Women. And I was around 28. So I think like it was started to like climb in, but then like around age 31, 31, it got really loud. And that was where the cramps I was still getting, but really the problem was the emotional and mental aspects of it, psychological aspects, which were like rage, paranoia, obsessiveness, anger. Those were my main symptoms.
And then at that point, were you like, okay, is this only me that's going through this? Or like, did you feel, because I know for me, I kind of felt isolated for a really long time. And like, I think my friends just kind of, they thought I was quite highly strung growing up. Do you know what I mean? So it's like, I was like the life and soul of like, lunchtime. I'll be the one who'd kind of be doing the stupid stuff, and like, and then I could also be like so high, but then also so low. And I think people were just kind of confused by that, but also interested in that. Do you know what I mean? And like, I think it was, for me, my mum was like, she had it as well. So she's undiagnosed, but I mean, like, I've got memories of being like 8 or 9 and my mum like running out of the house and like disappearing for like the afternoon because she's in a fit of rage. And she said she didn't have it until she was fine, until she started having children. And then everything kind of tipped over and she was like, whoa, this is like so intense. So I kind of had that. So luckily I had my mum to kind of like see me.
That's great. Yeah.
But I mean, like for her, she, she's now 61. And, 61 later this month. And, but yeah, she kind of just learned as well to just be like, I'll just get on with this. There's no kind of information out there. I'll just carry on with this in my life. I just, have to go through it every single month. And she never really did anything about it because she didn't know that she could. And then it was only that when I was having it, and she said, because I don't have children, she's like, you've got it worse than me, that I kind of started fighting for answers and looking at treatment plans and, going down that route. And then I started Moody Girl. And then it was like, whoa, like loads of people have this. And like, it opened up this huge network, So I mean, when you started experiencing those kind of symptoms, where did you go? Who did you turn to?
I mean, that was 2017, 2016, 2017. So, the internet has been evolving really quickly. And so even then, even though it seems like not that long ago, there were less resources. Like the amount of PMDD accounts on Instagram I see now, those did not exist in 2017.
So true.
So I feel like I found out about PMDD like right on the cusp. I had never heard of PMDD. I really don't think I had until, I was talking with my therapist about what was going on. And she, I think, had experienced it before. And thank God for that, because she was able to help me through it. She was able to name it. I remember her saying, it was like, the light bulb moment where you're like, oh, there's actually a thing for this, she said, have you heard of PMDD? And I said, I don't think so. And she told me what it was. And of course I went home and started looking everything up, and, I'm a writer, so I got really into it and really researching it. There wasn't a lot, but I did find the IAPMD website, which was super helpful.
Yeah.
Yeah. And what was so great was that they were having an in-person, this was obviously pre-pandemic, they were having an in-person convention called Break the Cycle. So I immediately, and like my husband, who, we were early dating at that point. So that was really the challenge. And that's what the book is about, because I'm like falling in love with this person, and then having these PMDD episodes, it was so hard to navigate. So he's like, you're going to that convention. I'm like, I am going. So I signed up. It was in Florida. Yeah. So I went there and was able to meet all these amazing, like high functioning, really cool women and people, and talk with them and learn a lot. And I taught a writing class there that was like, had everyone writing about their first period. And that was an amazing experience. I'm so glad I went, because they actually haven't had it since in person. They haven't had one. So I just am so lucky they were having it that year. So they were an amazing resource. The people who founded it, like Brett, who created the Me versus PMDD app, I connected with her. And then the other place that I actually found support was Reddit. and I have Reddit chapters all through my book, because there's a group on Reddit called like Werewolf Week. Well, it's called PMDD, and then they call it like Werewolf Week. And the tagline is, now we can all feel crazy together. And everyone posts about like a rant or event or a question, like everything, meds and supplements and blah, 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 on and on and on. And that was the most helpful, I would say. I didn't usually post things, but I read everything, and that helped me realize that like you could take antidepressants for it. And so Reddit, and I was also getting, along with like with PMDD, I would also get really bad acne, so Reddit also helped with helping me clear my skin. So I was just like, I love Reddit. It was so helpful. So if anyone out there is struggling, like go over to the Reddit PMDD page. Like it's so incredibly important.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like is Reddit, like, I don't know, I know that it's accessible here in the UK, but I feel like maybe in America it's more of a bigger thing. Maybe it's just that I haven't really used it too much in the UK.
I think it depends, like what you're looking for. Like a lot of people like TikTok because it's visual, but for me, I'm like a reader. I'm cerebral, and I like to read and write. So for me, I'm like, I don't care about TikTok. I just read Reddit all day.
Totally.
Because people are on there to help each other. It's not like Instagram of like pretty photos. It's like you're getting information, and like you can get information about like products, because no one's trying to sell you anything. So there's something really authentic about Reddit.
Cool.
Since there are no images. So yeah, and so what ended up happening, I wrote a chapter in the book there's a Reddit thread on PMS where it says like, hey ladies, like what did PMS make you cry about this month? And everyone has their answers. And I looked at it and I was like, that's when I also realized like, wow, PMDD is so not PMS. So like I wrote this chapter, and it's like all of these people saying like, oh, my cat is like so fluffy and it made me cry, or like I watched a Disney movie and it made me cry. And but then I went over to the other thread, and it was like people that were like, I can't cope, and I'm having suicidal ideation, or no one believes me, or I lashed out at my kid. I got in a fight at the dog park, like these things that were a lot more intense. So I put those two chapters, I don't think they're quite back to back, but they're in the book just to show the difference, because that to me, that was the best way to show it, rather than like be explaining it. When you see these threads, then you really see like, okay, PMS is normal. Like, yeah, you're supposed to feel that, of course.
Yeah, totally.
But this other thing is a whole other animal.
I mean, it's like, I swear, maybe I've seen it on IAPMD, but they compare it to like a sprained wrist to like a broken arm, or like like a a headache to like an extreme migraine where you can't get out of bed. It's like that black and white. And I mean, like, and as well, like I'll never say to someone your PMS isn't valid, because like, you know, you can still feel crummy and have PMS, and that's, you know, that's okay, and you can like nourish your body still, but it's just that kind of differentiation between the two is so important. So I think it's good that you've highlighted that in your book for sure. I mean, like in terms of kind of where you're at health wise now, like, so I know personally for me, so I got diagnosed and then I went on to HRT for 5 years, which is hormone replacement therapy. And then like it got to the point where after 5 years, my husband was like, I don't see that much of a difference in you now. You know, he was like, I feel like it served a purpose when I was in London. I was working, you know, quite an intense job there. And I really needed that to kind of get through that stage of my life. But from that now, it was 2020, it was like lockdown. And, you know, I knew that I wasn't going to have to be going into a job for like 3 or 4 months. So I was just like, okay, this is the moment now. Like my skin had flared up. I had psoriasis like all over my arms, all on my legs. It was flaring up my face. And I was just like, I just don't feel comfortable with like putting all of these gels on my body every day. It's kind of coming out in different ways. I'm still moody as hell, like, and I'm still having these black hole moments like every single month. So it was there that I was like, okay, now's the time. I'm going to detox like really intensely. I'm going to come off HRT slowly, which I did. And now it's been like,
is that a supplement? How do you take that?
Yeah, so it's like a transdermal gel that I had. And then I would have to take, because I still have a womb, I have to take like that was Eutrogestin, which is progesterone tablets for 10 days. And those sent me like, as soon I was like always warning my husband, like, it's big pill day, just so you know, I'm starting the big pills.
Progesterone didn't make you feel better? Because
yeah, no, it didn't for me. It's made me really. Yeah. What about you?
I'm interested in this for a totally different reason, which is infertility. And people are saying progesterone helps with that, but then I'm trying to see if there's a correlation between PMDD and that. And some people are saying that progesterone really helps them with PMDD, and others say the opposite. So of course it's like there's no answer.
There's no one fix for PMDD. I think it's like I know as a person, I'm quite sensitive, like in terms of like emotions, and I pick things up. So if I have a conversation, if someone's like upset, I'll kind of take that emotion on board, you know? And I think that's the type of person. Yeah. So, I mean, you know, it's normal kind of rise and fall of, and a lot of people are like, oh, you've got a hormonal imbalance. It's not an imbalance. It's just the fact that I'm super sensitive to the way. So I mean, it was from there that I was just like, okay, I'm detoxing. And then like I found like an amazing medical herbalist, and she kind of helped me with herbs for my skin at the time, which then kind of helped hand in hand with, you know, my periods. I would say like my psychological effects are still not, you know, I'm not cured. There's no cure. But I wouldn't say there's a huge difference from when I was on HRT and not. So now I'm just like natural. I'm not on any contraceptive. I'm not on any sort of medication.
Wow.
And I've just kind of come out of that, and I'm just, you know, it's still a work in progress for me. But I'm kind of interested in holistic ways of, you know, looking at that and maybe looking outside the box a bit. So I mean, for you, like, I was wondering, I know that, you know, from when you wrote your first book and from where you are now, where, you know, you're releasing your fourth one, and it's very much focused on PMDD and periods and your kind of journey through that. Have you found that like writing has provided you with solace when you're kind of experiencing these like symptoms each month? Has that been a form of like healing for you?
Well, I've never been able to work on my book when I'm in a PMDD episode. It's just not what you're thinking. It's not what you're thinking about.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like,
no, I understand.
When you're in that, and you're not like, oh, I should work on a chapter, you know? So that's sort of interesting. So it was challenging to get PMDD on the page of what it feels like, because whenever I was actually working on my book, I would probably feel more, you know, good. But I will say that like having the space of a book to look at patterns and, talk about things and meander and like really reflect, is helpful and has been helpful. And I kind of have a joke because I wrote this essay that just came out today on nylon, and it's about period apps, and it's about how they kind of get you like more into your phone and like more disconnected from your body, and how they just want you to upgrade. They just want money from us anyway. Like, are they actually helping us? So like what you're saying with holistic things, like I had a friend be like, oh, I think the moon is actually more helpful for me to track my period than the app. So I kind of was thinking like, because I was using a period app at the time that I was experiencing PMDD episodes to like take notes of like how I felt and what day it was. But then I just needed more space. Like I just needed a bigger creative medium. And that's why I wrote the book. I'm like, I have more to say about this. I have more to think about this. So I do think facing PMDD like on the page and really looking at it and like, there's like fights between my husband and I in the book, and looking at those patterns and the kind of cyclical behavior was really helpful, because I just feel so much more aware of PMDD. And I feel like the sort of, if there's like a moral of the book, would be that I finally integrated PMDD into my period, like into my life, rather than when I was first dealing with it, I saw it as like a completely separate thing than me. I was like, oh my God, this thing is so annoying. And I hated it, and I was ashamed of it, and I resisted it, and I didn't want to admit it. I denied it. And then by the end of the book, it's more like, this is just one aspect, and how do I integrate that with all of the other aspects of who I am, and accept it. And the book ends with me like, I had my period on my wedding day, because I always have my period. Like I just feel like I get it on every single event. So it kind of ends at the wedding of just being like, you know what, this is my like spiritual journey, and this is what I have to work with, and how can I accept it into my life? Because railing against it and like ignoring it and not wanting it that was not helpful for me. And the other kind of message in the book is that things, not just PMDD, but like anything you're dealing with, is usually a layered treatment approach, and there isn't a magic pill or magic bullet. And like that was what was so frustrating about PMDD for a long time. It's like, okay, if I do a ton of walking, a ton of yoga, and then I also am eating really perfectly, and I'm not having caffeine, and I'm not having alcohol, and I go to therapy, and I go to acupuncture, maybe I won't have a PMDD episode. Like that's just hard. You can't have, it's like a part-time job.
It's unrealistic. And like,
and it's money. It's like, who's got the money? Who's got the time? Like it's so high maintenance to do that. But it is a layered, that what I realized for me was like, it wasn't just like going on a pill to take it away. It had to be like, there were deeper like wounds at the heart of why I was having these explosions. And I realized a lot of those were like trust issues stemming from my childhood and like divorce and stuff. So once I started to really work on those, some of my symptoms started to lessen. And that was in conjunction with also 10 milligrams, like the lowest dose of Prozac leading up to my period, along with vitamin D and iron. And, I go to acupuncture occasionally, and I make sure to take long walks because they like help with cramps and stuff. But it's a lot of trial and error, and just treating yourself nicely and treating yourself well around your period instead of ignoring it. Because I feel like I ignored my period and like my PMS for so long, and I feel like my theory is that that's why in my 30s it like exploded at me, and it was like it dominated me.
I think that's so interesting, because I mean, like, I kind of look at it, and although sometimes when I lash out and afterwards I'll say to my husband like, oh sorry, it was just the PMDD, he was like, but didn't you say like PMDD is like actually your real feelings like coming out? Because I can't sometimes feel like if I'm at a point in my life which isn't kind of like serving me in terms of like, you know, the people I'm hanging out with, the life patterns that I, you know, if I'm going out and drinking loads and like the conversations are quite like toxic or, you know, and then I come back and then that really affects me. And then when I finally come on period, I'll know that kind of cycle is going to be a particularly bad one. I know, and then I'll think about all of those things and it will kind of highlight those. And the older I've got, the more I'm like, is that a bad thing? You know, like, is it a bad thing that it actually makes me confront those things that throughout the other weeks of the month, I'm just like, yeah, that's fine. I'm just going to carry on getting on with that. I'm going to keep doing these things that aren't doing well for me.
Right.
You know, and so sometimes I see it as a positive. I flip it on its head and I'm like, actually, like, no, that's not good for me. So let's eliminate that from my life.
I
No,
love that. I
you
love that
know,
way of thinking. I had something recently, I got my period like a few, maybe like 4 or 5 days ago. And like, I was having kind of a problem with a student on email, and I had like a really firm boundary that I don't know if I would have had at different times in my cycle, but like they were really pushing my boundaries, and I wrote something back that's super firm. And usually I'm like overly generous and like let everyone kind of like, I give a lot.
yeah.
And I wrote an email that just had like the firmest boundary, and I sent it, and I got my period the next day, and I was like, like I was like, that's good that I sent that. Like she
Yeah.
needed to receive that email, and that was what I was doing to set up boundaries for myself. And I don't know if I would have done that at another point in my cycle. So I like what you're saying. And it's funny you say that about like you and your husband, because there is a dialogue in my book where like I have this kind of stupid freak out, and then my husband was like, he's like, it's not even PMDD time though. And then I say, well, that wasn't PMDD. That was just my personality. So it's like, what part is which? And there is overlap. And like,
Yeah.
you know, I feel like we PMDD people have this rap of like, people have this reputation of people being like, oh, well, then you can just blame everything on your period. It's like, no, that's not what I do. That's not
No.
what I want to do. I would never, why would we ever make this up? It's like such hell. Of course we don't want to have it. It sucks. So I just think it's so stupid when people just think you like want to blame your period. You know, it's not that at all.
Absolutely. Yeah, no. And I mean, like, I just think, well, for me, I also, as the older I've got, I usually find now ovulation quite intense. I'll like, as soon as I ovulate, I'll like, today I've had like 2 naps. I'm just like, and they're not just like 20-minute naps, like 2-hour separate naps. And my
Wow.
husband's like,
Nice.
you know, wow, like that's quite full on.
I
I'm
get
just
really
like,
bad acne. Yeah. I notice now my acne is when I ovulate.
really? And then, I mean, like
Mhm.
I'll tell you in person, you were going through like a real journey with your acne.
Yes.
And I mean, like I've experienced that with psoriasis. So like
Yep.
PMDD was like always something I struggled with. And then all of a sudden psoriasis was chucked into the mix. And I was like, oh my God, like I can't
I know.
do
When
this.
both are going on, it's how do we even get, I don't know how I even got through that. I struggled really bad with acne in my late 20s, and I wasn't tracking my period. And looking back, I'm sure that I'm sure it was because it was monthly, and I'm
Mm.
sure it was around my cycle each month. Yeah.
How
Yeah.
did you get a hold on your skin? Do you think it was like kind of healing?
Reddit.
Oh, really? Again?
Reddit skincare. If you go to skincare addiction,
Yeah.
like reading about skincare and what has worked for other acne sufferers introduced me to ingredients that I should have been using that sadly dermatologists are just stupid, and they give everyone the benzoyl peroxide to dry out their
Mm.
skin like teenagers in the 90s, whereas there's just like lactic acid, glycolic acid, like all these acids, they mostly keep my skin and clear, and sulfur soap. There's some skincare stuff in the book, because like, yeah, it can like to be suffering mentally from PMDD and feeling like paranoid and everyone hates you and that you hate everyone and that you want to, you know, you just want to be alone and you want to die. And I don't mean like suicidal, but I'm just being hyperbolic. And then also having to have really bad cystic acne at the same time and deal with that. It is just, it's a nightmare. It's a nightmare. So yeah, I feel like I worked really hard on all aspects of it, like the skincare part, but that also goes with stress, right? So like cortisol and stress makes skin worse. And it's definitely not what you want to hear when you're experiencing it, because you're like, I can't help if I'm stressed. I mean, everybody's stressed and they don't all get cystic acne. So
Yeah.
I think it's just like yeah, reading about skincare. There's so many good resources now, and like there's skincare podcasts now and stuff. And that's really helped. And now I have like the products that work for me, and my skin is mostly good. Cause I used to get like a cyst a month, and now it's maybe once a year. So I've
Wow.
come a long way, and healed my skin, was kind of healing in conjunction with PMDD and um my other issues. Yeah.
Are there any kind of like rituals that you kind of do now as well? So obviously Reddit's been really important for you.
Yeah,
No, but I mean, it's, it's really
it has.
interesting, and in terms of like reading other people's stories and being able to engage. And I think that's a form of therapy. That's a form of healing, being able to interact with other people who understand your situation. Because I mean, that's why I started Moody Girl, all those years ago. I started it because at that time I didn't even know that IAPMD
Oh,
existed.
really?
I didn't
Yeah,
know.
you were one of the first Instagram accounts
Yeah. So I mean,
to
and it
talk
was
about this stuff.
exactly, and it was only because I was just so frustrated with like nobody understanding. And then it was like, oh wow, IAPMD is out there. Vicious cycle PMDD in the UK is out there. And I was like, okay, there's people already doing this. That's amazing. So it kind of opened up that, and just that dialogue, it really kind of was a really good part of healing for me. So yeah, so I think that's really important. I mean, in terms of like daily life now, are there any kind of things that you do or can like say to people, recommendations that work for you to kind of like maybe calm yourself down, or make yourself feel more relaxed, or be more accommodating of those emotions and feelings that you're going to go through?
Yeah. Yeah, one thing I do is I definitely make sure that I'm tracking it really well.
Mhm.
Um and that I have like the window that I know I'm going to want to be most likely solo, and not have like obligations and things like that. So I think about that stuff in advance now. I used to feel like I did it too late because I would just hope for the best and like, I'll be fine, I'll be fine. I can control it. That was like my attitude at first. And then you're stuck in a situation where you have like a presentation at work, or for me, teaching a class or being at a family event at like the
Mm.
worst time. So now I really protect that time, whether it's 3 days, whether it's a week, um, to make sure I'm going to have enough downtime that I need. And I really take that downtime. And I think it's like a great time to just go inward and like stay home and take baths, watch movies, get food that you like, and be nice to yourself. I just don't believe in like the white knuckling through anymore.
Mhm.
Um, I feel like that's what I did all of my 20s and as a teenager, of like, you just suffer through everything and you pretend it's not happening, and you're in like major pain,
Mhm.
whether that's psychological or physical.
Mhm.
And that's really unhealthy. Like I was just talking to the BBC, because Australia is about to make it the law that people get 10 days menstrual leave.
Wow. Yeah. I
The
mean,
law.
yeah. I was literally
And
looking at this the other day because I was like, so now with my period, so not only do I get the psychological side of things, which I can kind of handle now, but now it's like, since I've come off HRT, I have extreme pain, like real
oof,
bad pain, which I'm kind of like gonna get looked at anyway to see if
good.
anything else is going on. But to the point where I have to kind of, I'm always like I'm hungover after, because I'll be up all night with pain, like big
Oh,
pain.
yeah.
And then like I'm so hungover the next day, I'm like, I can't go and sit in the office right now. I can't go to work,
Nope.
I feel like it would be detrimental for me to be there. Do you know what I mean? Because like I'm so like lethargic, I'm like exhausted, I'm like dosed up on like, at the moment my medical herbalist has given me like some pain ointment, or no, not ointment, like solution that I'll take in a pipette, because I was taking too many Nurofen, which is like strong ibuprofen. So I've
Mm-hmm.
tried to like minimize that to half, and then have like a pipette of this pain stuff, which tastes awful. But I mean, I just do it. But I'm dosed up, and a little bit like not myself. And I'm just like, why do I have to feel so bad about like having to call and work from home, And I was looking into it, and like, I think like India as well, and China, they also give you like 1 day per
Mm-hmm.
month menstrual leave. But I was reading that like in China and specifically women really don't want to take that day off because it makes them look inferior in the office. So it's like, oh, Rachel's taken a menstrual day,
I know.
and it's
I
like
know.
I don't want to feel like that, but you do feel inferior. You do feel like, I'm not going to be able to keep up with the men because, I feel like shit right now.
That's exactly what the person I was speaking to was saying at the BBC of how does that work? And women aren't going to want to take it because they're going to
Mm,
feel like they're falling behind. And I think that's really where like the real work also comes in and how to
yeah.
change that. Because, and then I was talking with her about like how I hate the quote, anything you can do, I can do bleeding. Cause I'm like, no, I can't actually, and I don't want to. Like I understand the spirit of the quote, and
But yeah,
yeah, sure,
maybe if you
but
have like a regular period, then
yes,
fine. Yes,
yes.
of course.
If
That's a
your
great
period
quote for you.
doesn't affect you at all, if it doesn't affect you at all, then sure. But of course, it affects everyone a little bit. Not that it's PMDD or even PMS, but like it does affect you because your body is doing something,
Yeah,
right?
totally, totally.
So I think that that's where the work is to be done, is that people should take the menstrual leave without having a stigma around it. But that'll be the next, there's always like the next piece of work. So maybe now the work is like that people are even get it offered to them. Like that's amazing, right? That's huge. And then from there, I think also a lot of it comes down to people who don't menstruate need to learn about things. Like that's who should really be reading my book, is people who don't menstruate, because they can
Absolutely.
learn a lot about their partners and who they live with. So
It should be
I-
from school age, in my
yeah,
opinion, like elementary school, it needs to, yeah, destigmatized. And I mean, even now, like I am Moody Girl, but it's find situations where it's awkward and I want to kind of pretend that I'm not Moody Girl. Do you know what I
sure.
mean?
Me too. Yeah.
Because
Yeah.
there's a time and a place, and like sometimes you don't want to be seen for the person who struggles like with her period, then the person next to you who's
Yes.
getting on with everything quite contently
Yes.
doesn't struggle, and then
But
instantly
maybe they
someone else
struggle
like
with
that.
something else. But that's the thing. It's
Yeah.
like that's where periods need to be like neutralized, like not even normalized. It's like neutralized too, because why is it more like, why is it expected in our culture that you can call in sick and be like, oh, I'm just like so hungover, and people think that
Mm.
that's cool?
Or like a backache, say you've got
Yeah.
like I don't know,
Migraine, food
yeah,
poisoning, and those
my
could all be lies. And people are
totally.
like, okay. But then if you actually have like, which is a fact of like, no, I have an egg literally traveling through me and it causes pain. Like, why
Yeah.
can't it just be like neutral? But instead, because for so many years it was like used to bully, girls like on the playground and stuff. And that's where the real mistake was too, because boys should have been learning about it. And a lot of these stories in my book of the women I interviewed, most of them said like, oh yeah, the teacher showed a video just to the girls, like
Yeah.
so they just don't know. And I think if they had learned on a scientific level what was happening, and to honor that, we would be in a different situation right now. But I do think the new generation schools are
Mhm.
presenting it more
Mhm.
that way. So I do have hope for like, the newer generations.
Yeah, I think so too. I think it's kind of like, as you say, like unpicking the years of how it's been represented throughout life in all different cultures.
Right.
And that's even with myself, like unpicking the shame behind that, and there's, as much as I'm open about it, as much as I can be, there's still kind of shame behind it as well. Like I would
Yeah.
much prefer if I could just go about my life and not have
Me
to deal with
too.
this like monkey on my back all the time. And so it's
Yes.
like, great, yeah, okay, fine, I've finished my period. And now like I'm actually feeling, even after my period, I'm like, I have the hangover and then I'm just exhausted. And I'm like, my poor husband, he's probably like, when are we gonna have
No.
a good day?
A normal week. I call it the golden week. Yeah.
Yeah. So I mean, I think it's as well, like each month for me is never the same. And I
Same.
do kind
Same
of
with me.
take each month with a new kind of hope, and mind frame, like, yep, it's fine, you're going to get through this. And hopefully I mean, I do eventually want to have children. That scares me slightly, about like the repercussions of afterwards, but I'm going to kind of like
So,
deal with that as and when. There's
yeah,
no point kind of
exactly.
stressing about that before it happens. um
Yeah.
But yeah, so I mean, in terms of like where you are now,
Mhm.
I know that you've kind of way more kind with yourself during your cycles. You've got a husband who understands, the turmoil. That's also, by the way, for anyone who's listening, who's like got PMDD and with a partner who's abusive with it and tries to kind of use that in a way that's gaslighting you to feel like you're inferior, or like you're a broken person, then my advice would be get rid, because that's never going to work for
No,
you ever.
never.
You aren't a damaged person. Like, I think if anything, it makes you more in tune with like situations and feelings, and so I've met so many women who have it, who are just like so interesting and have so many cool things to talk about. um so yeah, so I think I mean, for us, I feel that we're kind of both in a similar situation where we've found the right partner for us,
Yeah.
who understands it. That's like one in fundamental, for me. I've been in previous relationships where I was like, yeah, you should go on the contraceptive pill. And I'm like, I knew that wasn't going to work for me because it sends me
Stupid.
batshit. But I did it anyway. And, like in university, I was like, I think all I took was 4 contraceptive pills, and I couldn't leave my room. I was like in a ball, just like so stressed out, just like I can't leave.
Okay, the same exact thing happened to me with those
Really?
pills. I took them like 4 days. I was having like images of guns and like I was like, what is going on? I was crying. And so I just flushed them all down the toilet.
Literally me too. I was just like, no way. Like, I am not doing this just so like you feel happy that I'm on contraception, like a contraceptive pill. Also, why is it always the women that have to have the
No,
contraceptive pill? Like, we've already got all these hormones rushing through our bodies, and then we just have to
no.
mess with them more. And it's like, I don't know how it was in America, but in the UK it was like, as soon as you kind of hit like 14, your friends are like, yeah, I'm on the pill. I went to the doctor, and yeah, I just said that I got migraines, and then they put me on the pill. And so like here, I just went to the GP and was just like, yeah, I get really bad migraines. So just because I wanted to fit in like like a sheep that I
Sure.
was.
Yeah.
But I mean, I was 15, you want to kind of blend in, and yeah, and then so you go on this pill, and that's it for, my friends have just only come off it, and they're like 31, 32, and they've been on it for 15, 16 years. I'm just like,
Yep.
that's
I have friends who've done that too. And I think everyone wanted to go on it because people would go on it for acne
Mm.
too. And it would like clear your skin, but then you would have these other side effects. There's an amazing video in the New York Times. I think it's called Birth Control Your Own Adventure. It gets into PMDD as well. This person tried everything for what was she experiencing? Well, she got off her birth control was the first thing, and then she had an IUD, and then she got PMDD, and then she had to try this med and this med. It's this beautifully done artistic video. I can send it to you after our talk.
Yeah, please do.
But she talks about how it makes you a different person and how when you get off it you like find out who you really are. And then but then what's happening with at least what I see on like PMDD Reddit is people have been on it since, like you're saying, since a teenager, and then they get off it, they're like 30, they want to have kids or whatever, and then they get PMDD.
Mm-hmm.
So I've seen a lot of that as well. Yeah.
I'm
I
just
think the key for me has been to just like to shrink the symptoms. Like this is what I learned at that conference was like, okay, if your symptoms are 10 days, working on it so that it can lessen. And I mean, my heart goes out to the people who like feel it after like you ovulate and then you're in 2 weeks of PMDD. And I used to have more like 10 days.
wow.
And then I kind of got it to 7, and then I got it to 5. And now, to be honest with you, I really only have like one bad day,
Wow.
which is amazing. Yeah.
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 That's, I mean, incredible. And I think that's a lot to kind of say about maybe where you are in your life as well. You've kind of, you've made peace with it. You're not trying to fight against it.
Exactly. Yeah. That
And I
helps.
think,
That helps.
yeah,
Yeah.
100%. And I feel like, in a way, I think I'm still kind of working through that. And I think like I feel like I am, and then it happens and I'm like,
Yeah.
oh,
Me too.
maybe I have
Yeah.
made peace with this thing.
Yeah, it was funny because like my book actually releases tomorrow and I hadn't really had a PMDD episode for a while. And then like 2 months ago, and then I was doing interviews about the book and I was feeling kind of disconnected from
Yeah.
PMDD because I'm like,
Yeah.
oh, it seems like another lifetime. But then I got one and I was like, okay, A, this reminds me that this is real.
Yeah.
B, this is good for my book because now I'll be more in touch with what those feelings are. Because let's say you do get like medicated or you figure it out or you're not having them, you do forget how real the feelings are at the time. So I
Mm,
am glad I documented it when I did
yeah.
because it was such a strange time in my life and I had never felt that like dysphoria before, premenstrual dysphoric disorder. Like it's a scary feeling. So
Mm.
I'm glad I got it down because I feel like otherwise I would have just you forget things, and especially when you recover and then you just think like, oh, maybe it wasn't that bad, but now I have my book to prove to me like, no, it was that bad. you know
Absolutely. It's like
yeah,
a big fog is over my brain. And then it's like, I don't even know what happened there. I can't remember what I said or,
yeah,
and it's crazy. And I think like in terms of your book, like, did you find, I don't know, like for me, when I first started Moody Girl, I started speaking about PMDD a lot. So originally, like when I started it, I was like severe PMS because that's what I thought it was. And then I finally got the diagnosis. And then I would do a lot of like interviews and I was kind of like opening up more. And then like when I really started to like analyze it and go into like the quite like turbulent years that I'd been through with this, afterwards I'd almost like feel so exhausted. I was like, during it I'd feel like super hyped and like, yes, this has been like locked inside of me for all these years and I can finally speak about it. And then afterwards I was just like, wow, I'm like, I need to like close the door, not speak to anyone, turn the lights off and just sleep for like 5 hours.
yeah.
Did you kind of find that when you kind of put the pen to paper, did you find it like quite, did it triggering or did it bring up anything, or was it more kind of healing for you?
I enjoyed writing about it, but the thing is I started it in 2017 and now it's 2022, so I am in a different space with it,
Mhm.
and so I'm going to have to be going out and like you're saying, like doing
Yeah.
all this press and talk about PMDD, and I don't feel as connected and
Mhm.
passionate about PMDD as I did in 2018, because
Yeah.
that's how it works, like when you write memoir and nonfiction, like you're growing in real time. Like I'm not stuck in the past. So I'm like, oh, my life is in a different place, but I'm going to do my best to still honor it and speak about it. But I'm also ready to, and definitely after press, like you said, like I'll be ready to move on from it and move forward with my life. Like I don't really feel strong about it as my identity. Like I don't feel like
Yes.
I'm Chloe, I have PMDD. I don't feel that way. I feel like PMDD is super mysterious. I don't
Yeah.
feel like once you get the diagnosis, you have it. I think, like you're saying, I think it's cycle to cycle. In some cycles, yes, I think they could qualify as PMDD. Other cycles, I think they're severe PMS. Other
Mhm.
cycles, regular PMS. Like that's where I'm at right now.
Yeah.
I will in 2017 and 2018, PMDD. Like I
Yeah.
remember how that felt, and that was PMDD, but I don't feel I don't I like I identify with the label a little bit. I like that it's out there. It's super helpful. It's a fascinating concept and disorder and heartbreaking, really. And it's heartbreaking to see how many people do suffer from it. And the more you openly talk about something, like you said, then you see all these people are suffering
Mhm.
with it. And this is with everything. And if you are courageous enough to come forward, like you were back when no one was really talking about it, then you learn that there's people you can really help. So I'm just hoping that is where I was at when I first learned about it will now have this book, that is someone first person going through it versus because when I was looking for a book, all of the books were scientific.
Yeah.
And when you're in PMDD, you don't care about
The
science and
facts.
like
You don't want the facts. You just want like firsthand experience.
yeah, you just want someone who's like gone through and like made it out to the other side or not even made it out, but like has gone through it and not like, okay, well, you can take this vitamin and this did it. Like it's just
Mhm.
a different kind of thing. So I think it's a really unique book. And I hope people that are like I think it's for anybody, but definitely I think it will help people who are like just discovering PMDD or feel like they have had it or suffer with PMS, and that they can be open about it. I don't believe in like suffering in silence anymore about it, or thinking like, oh, I can't, like, oh, it's just my period, I should be able to handle it, I'm not going to like try a med. It's like, no, go ahead. Like if you're suffering, life's too short. You don't have to suffer with this, you
Absolutely.
know.
And I think
Because I
like,
used to have all this like taboo about like going on meds and stuff, and I had never been on meds and I like didn't want to, but then you just kind of have to get over it, you
yeah,
know.
yeah, totally. And I think like I resonate with that so much because when I first started Moody Girl, it was like, it was so enlightening for me. I opened this kind of new world. And then after about 2 years, I was like, I was actually finding it quite triggering because, you know, I'd get like private messages on my Facebook
Sure.
and people were kind of opening up loads, which was amazing. But I kind of felt like at that time I wasn't qualified to be
Yeah.
advising these people. I was like, who am I to be giving you, you know, life advice on how to get out of this right now? And I'd always kind of, at that point, I was like steering them towards IAPMD because I was just like, that is where you're going to
Yeah,
find the
that's good.
resources. Um, but yeah, so I kind of felt like that was like PMDD became something that defined me. And so I kind of took a break, and that's kind of where I've been figuring stuff out, and I've been looking at myself holistically, like as a whole person. You know, and this podcast is kind of about like holistic healing. But
Mhm.
what I really wanted to do was to kind of have an episode, especially with you, because I know that we're both kind of on the same page with it. And you know, and as you say, like with PMDD, there is no shame in kind of taking meds for it. And like for 5 years, I was on meds for it, you know, and it's only now that I've reached a point in my life where I have like a good foundation of where I'm living and my husband and my family are close by, that I'm able to kind of wean myself off them. But it could be that someone else is in a position where they can't, so that's not
Yeah.
anything to be kind of frowned upon. But I just think, like as you say, it becomes something that defines you. But I think for listeners, like it doesn't need to. And as you say, like you went to that conference and you met all of those highly functioning people.
Mhm.
And I can say the same for us. You know, I think that,
Mhm.
you know, we've made the best of the situation.
Yeah.
um and we're kind of muddling our way through it each
Yeah. I mean,
cycle.
you have a podcast, you have a platform, I have a book. Like it is interesting that that's what we both did with it.
Mhm.
And that's something interesting too about my book is it's not, my editor kind of helped me with that, of saying like, you know what, it's not, she was like, let's shake off the identity of like being the period book and bring
Yeah,
in other aspects. So like there's
absolutely.
aspects about like me becoming a stepmom, and there's divorce, and there's dating, and like all different things, because it's like it's not just one thing. It goes to your looking at life and looking at PMDD holistically. And I think for me, part of why the PMDD was exacerbated was because I was falling in love, and so all these issues were getting kicked up, um, because I had never been in a serious relationship before. So PMDD, in a way, you know, it becomes like your teacher. You know, what is it teaching you? I was on a podcast called Menstruality Podcast, and I was talking with her. She's in the UK,
Oh, cool.
and she was great. And she was saying that there was a point in her life where she feels like she had PMDD, and she had rage at her husband every month, and they divorced. And she thinks her PMDD was telling her like she was in the wrong marriage. You know, like there is something, it's telling you something. It really
Absolutely.
is.
I
Yeah.
think that is, honestly, I kind of got goosebumps there, because that's like, as we were kind of touching on earlier, it does highlight things that aren't working in your life, you know, and it's just it confronts you in like the most abrasive way. It's just like, if you're going to try and just like sit there and just ignore these things that's going on, like there's no way that PMDD is going to let you do that. So
That's exactly right. For me, it was trust issues. And once I healed those, like through
yeah,
therapy and through my husband and through myself and through, you know, searching and spirituality and stuff, I'm just in such a better place with it. And like, yeah, it was a lot of work. And I resented the fact that I had to do all that work and couldn't just live my life normally and have a normal period and not have to have this period like be the punctuation of like everything I was doing. But at the end of the day, I'm in some ways grateful for it. And I know if you're going through it hard, like really it's difficult right now, you don't want to hear it, but there is like a light at the end, and you can, you know, reach out for support and like try an acupuncturist, try a Reddit group or a support group, or like, you know, talk to other people who have it, because otherwise it can become very lonely. But in ways, yeah, I'm grateful because it got me so much more in touch with my body and with health, and I understand things so much more. Um, just the cycle, because you know, they call the cycle like the fifth vital sign of health. Like, it's something that should be looked at. It's like, what color is the blood? You know, what are your symptoms? Are you getting migraines? Well, then why? You know, there's like something behind every symptom, whether that symptom is physical or psychological. There's something behind it. And that was a great quote I got from the Break the Cycle conference, because they said like every symptom is a need that is not being met.
Mm.
And I thought that was so interesting. And I still think about that all the time.
Yeah, I mean, I haven't heard that quote, and that's something definitely I'll be kind of thinking about
Yeah, it's
moving forward
good.
as well. Well, honestly, thank you so much for chatting with
Thank
me
you.
today. I felt like it's just like flown by. I just kind of looked
I
at
could
the
talk to you
time.
forever. Yeah. I could talk to you forever. I'm so happy you're starting a podcast, and just thank you so
Yay.
much for having me.
No worries. Honestly, it's been so good. And thank you so much. We look forward to your book being released as well.
Yes. Thank you.
Take
Talk to you
care.
later.
Bye.
Bye.
And now we're going to finish on a short excerpt from Chloe's new book, The Red Zone. Enjoy.
How unfortunate that khakis were the popular pant during the years we were 11, 12, 13, 14. We would walk around saying, "Check my butt," to each other. Pads in our pockets, tampons in our lockers, the smell of blood, the way you can smell the blood before you even begin bleeding. Rusty. Why did we have to wear what everyone else was wearing? Why couldn't we have been empowered enough to change the trend, to wear dark denim or black? It had to be khakis from Old Navy or Gap, American Eagle, or Limited Too. On Instagram, an ad tells me to say goodbye to leak anxiety. But without leak anxiety, who would I be? How many hours of my life have I spent wondering if I was bleeding through my pants, realizing I had bled through my pants? How many pairs of jeans and underwear have I ruined because the blood came early or late, or more heavily than I'd anticipated? Doctors and commercials and gynecologists and even friends often ask if your period is heavy. Articles and books and podcasts refer to heavy periods. They say if your period is heavy, you might have a problem. But the real problem is that we were never told what a regular period should look like. At least in my middle school and high school, we were never handed 3 buckets of blood and told which one was light, regular, and heavy. We were never told how many tampons or pads was normal to fill during a period. I don't know if my period is heavy. I can only guess. Some months I bleed more than others. Heavy compared to what? Compared to whom?
Oh my God. Literally, like, I'm wearing trousers right now, and I'm like, they're white, and I totally bled in them today.
It's like it never ends. It's so weird. You would think that only happens when you're a teenager, but it continues.
It literally continues throughout the whole of your life. Oh, honestly, thank you. That was really, really good.